This is Susan Holmes. I'm showing you a portion of the body camera footage video that was released to the public. This is about 31 seconds of it that you're seeing on my right here in front of you. It's the start of CSU Officer Phil Morris in his vehicle. Now I'm going to do this very superficial analysis to show you some blatant distortions just from an obvious frame-by-frame look at this video in the first 31 seconds. I cannot watch all of the video of Jeremy. It's been very, very difficult for me. I cannot do the kind of analysis I would normally do about anything. Now, I fought an open records case to get exact copies, unredacted, of the body camera footage and the audio files. Because CSU PD, CSU, Colorado State University, and their police department refused to give me copies, exact copies. I requested from the very beginning, nonstop. I had to file a lawsuit. The Colorado Attorney General's office stepped in and represented CSU PD. They were instrumental in making sure I did not get police records, the exact copies of the body camera footage and audio files. That's your Attorney General in Colorado, who's preventing access to police records. I want people to understand that very clearly. They actively fought to keep me from getting police records so that I can have an independent forensic analysis done by a third-party crime lab that is practiced in doing this kind of work. They do it all the time. I talked to a number of experts throughout the nation for the last few years. I knew where to take the footage once I got it. But the judge, working together with the Attorney General, ruled that I could not get those copies. Yes, police secrecy and suppression of police records is part of the corruption that is taking place in Fort Collins and in Colorado State. The public really, really needs to understand that. If something happened to you, the police did something to you in Colorado, you wouldn't be able to get those records, the digital records. They would fight you, especially if they'd harmed you in some way or they killed you or your loved ones. Colorado would step in. Not just Colorado. The Attorney General, if it happens on a campus, the Attorney General will step in and prevent you from getting those records. Do you understand? There is no freedom of records when police kill you or a loved one. No freedom. There is no freedom of records. This is not a democratic state, Colorado, for access to police records, and people need to understand that. So, I decided to take 31 seconds, and actually somebody had walked me through this before, not too long ago, had walked me through these first few seconds to show me some obvious problems that people need to, that people, when you look at this, you have to challenge and question the fact that you've been lied to. I know that this is a fake video. I know they altered this video, and I know they altered the audio. I know that. But people have to come to terms with the fact that police are corrupt and that their crime labs alter body camera footage. When they commit crimes, they alter them so that they don't ever get charged with a felony of tampering with evidence. And this is what's happened in my case with my son, Jeremy Holmes. This is why the DA and the sheriff and CSU PD, they all work together, and the Fort Collins police are out to put me away and silence me. They're actively trying to do that because they did not expect me to get the exposure I've been getting for months now on what's happened with Jeremy. They thought they could silence me a long time ago, but I'm still here. So here's the first thing I want to point out to people in this brief, analysis of these 31 seconds. Number one, this is the front end of Phil Morris's vehicle. Colorado State University, Fort Collins, Officer Phil Morris, the person who killed my son. That's the front of his vehicle at this light at Prospect and Whitcomb in Colorado. If you look around the neighborhood, you see there's no college dormitories or anything. This is where Jeremy was heading. He was heading to this neighborhood. He was almost there when Officer Phil Morris drove up on him with his lights on and jumped out with his gun out. Remember, this was not a justified shooting because Officer Phil Morris was not supposed to even stop Jeremy. I never called CSU PD, never called Fort Collins to ask them to stop Jeremy. Never made that phone call. I made a phone call to non-emergency number with Fort Collins and asked them to take a message to my older son. Okay, what's important about that is that another CSU officer who's involved in this murder homicide of my son Jeremy Holmes, Katie Aaron is her name, she did what I asked the police to do. She went to my older son's apartment in Aggie Village. When you look at this video, you'll see Jeremy walking down the street past the whole village development, which has 6-foot fence all around it. He's way past the only entrance. He's walking down the street. He never went into Aggie Village. Okay? So Officer Phil Morris was not intervening on a dangerous suspect. That's a fake narrative. Number one. Number two, while you're looking at this car right now, there, at the same time that you're seeing this car at this light, Officer Katie Aaron is already in my older son's apartment in the Aggie Village. She's already there talking to my son and daughter-in-law, having a conversation with them. Already. There's already a police officer with my son and daughter-in-law as we sit looking at this light with Phil Morris's vehicle here. Do you understand that? I want to make that very clear. My son, older son's safety was not an issue at all. He was safe. The police officer's there having a conversation with him. She had a radio on her shoulder. She was radioing off and on, back and forth. Then how do I know these details? Because my son told me all the details. My older son told me all the details. My daughter included. I was in phone conversations with them back and forth. I couldn't get down there because my car was broken down. Had stopped running. Now, so there's this cop. So a cop is already in my son's apartment having a conversation with him. Perfectly safe. During that conversation, my son, and by the way, I saw the body camera footage from Officer Katie Aaron. They never talk about it. The district attorney of Fort Collins, the CSU PD, the media, Coloradoan, never talks about Officer Katie Aaron's video. They'll never talk about it because they don't want the public to know that that video exists and that they didn't release it. Do you understand? They did not release her video. I've been demanding to get copies of that and Officer Phil Morris's body camera footage. So she's in that apartment talking to my son, having a conversation. My son asked her a number of questions. He asked her, was it illegal? She went to him to give him the message I asked him to send to my son, because that's what I wanted. I never asked them to hunt Jeremy down. But here's the point. So he says to her, well, what's the problem? They're having a conversation. You know, and she said, well, we got this call from your mother. That's why I'm here, you know, to tell you to, you know, just watch out for Jeremy and keep the door shut, you know, until she gets down here. You know, your mom called. And he said, okay, so he said, so what's the problem? He said, I know Jeremy's been having some mental health issues recently, you know. And she says, well, we just, you know, are here to talk with you. I'm just here to talk to you. And he said, well, wait a minute. She said, well, he has, you know, he supposedly has a knife. And he says, well, what kind of knife? She says, well, it's a sheath knife. Apparently your mom said that. And he says, well, is it illegal for Jeremy to walk down the street with a sheath knife? And she says no. And then he's asked her a question, well, you know, he asked her like two other questions. One of them had to do with, he's explaining about the mental health problems. And then he says, well, what are you planning to do? And she said, well, I'm just going to do a welfare check. Do you understand that now, everybody? That's what's on the body camera footage. Officer Katie Aaron is in my son's apartment as we're looking at this car, telling my son she's communicating the message I wanted him to have. She's ensuring his safety, which he was safe. And then she's telling him that she's going to do a welfare check. At that moment that they are having this part of the conversation where she says, oh, she even says, oh, it's no big deal. We're just going to do I'm just going to do a welfare check. At that moment, all of them in that apartment heard Jeremy scream. It was extremely loud. It had to be loud from the distance from where he was on the sidewalk, which you're going to see in a minute, to when they heard it in their apartment. But they all heard the scream. It was huge. At that moment, within a moment of that scream, they heard the bullets. My son threw my daughter-in-law on the floor. He didn't know where the bullets were coming from. The officer ran out the door. Officer Katie Aaron ran out the door. My son ran after her. My older son ran after her. He ran up to the fence that he couldn't get over and could see his brother dying on the sidewalk. Now, that isn't in Katie Aaron's body camera footage, but I know because my son told me. And at the same time, my daughter-in-law was on the phone with me at that moment telling me, Susan, I'm afraid that they've killed Jeremy. So, Katie Aaron, in her body camera footage, is running up and down the length of that fence, trying to get over the fence to get to where Jeremy is lying face down in blood pouring out of him all over the sidewalk. He's clearly gone. He's dying. And you can see she's huffing and puffing from one part of the fence to the other part of the fence, running back and forth, running back and forth. Apparently, she eventually jumps on top of a car that was parked near the fence in the parking lot and leaps over the fence, gets over the fence, runs up to where Phil Morris is standing over Jeremy and still screaming at him with his gun pointing at him as Jeremy is lying face down. Blood is pouring out of him on the sidewalk. And he is screaming at Jeremy the whole time with his gun pointed at Jeremy as he's dying. That's what the public doesn't get to see. That Phil Morris was out of control from the beginning, and that Phil Morris was not supposed to be doing the welfare check. It was Officer Katie Aaron. She is the one who was in the apartment with my older son and daughter-in-law, who told them that she would be doing the welfare check. This is the body camera they refused to release to the public. Now, in order to protect Phil Morris, they edited this body camera footage. We have no idea what the sequence of the frames are, but I'm going to point something out right now as we move along here. He's going down Prospect. Jeremy's walking west on Prospect, down the street peacefully. Okay. Here we see the front end of Morris's car. You can see Jeremy's figure, a figure of Jeremy, walking down the street peacefully. By the way, when you see that black figure in the distance, look at the lights behind it. That was where those lights are is the only entrance into the village apartments over here. My son's apartment was over in this area behind all these buildings. All right? Way back there. There's a number of buildings back there. There's a huge fencing all along here. Jeremy is almost to the end of Whitcomb. A little bit longer, he'd be at the end of Whitcomb. But you see this figure right here. The light, that's where the only entrance was. Jeremy walked by it in the village. He was not a threat to anyone. And here's the other fact. At this point where Jeremy is on West Prospect, approaching Whitcomb, that's almost 2.5 miles from my home, from where Jeremy left his home. 2.5 miles. When Jeremy, here's another fact you'll never hear reported, has never been reported. When Jeremy left my home, that knife that he was carrying was in a heavy-duty leather sheath that was snapped closed. It was thick. And he had it in his side pocket. He had a side pocket on his pants, and that's where it was when he left the house. In a very heavy sheath in his side pocket. So Jeremy, at this point where you're seeing him on this camera, I don't know if this footage is real at all. It is not authenticated. It has no audit trail. And it's never had a third-party analysis done by it, which is what I wanted to have done, because I'll explain in a few minutes. But you see here, Jeremy has walked over 2 miles, almost 2.5 miles, peacefully. He never harmed anyone. He never threatened anybody at all. Don't you think if Jeremy was walking down the street through businesses, past hotels, past people walking everywhere, this is a very public area. It's loaded with people from the college all over the place. He walked through all those people, through businesses. I know exactly where he walked, with people everywhere shopping. Don't you think that they would have noticed Jeremy carrying a knife and called the police? That's because he wasn't walking with the knife out. He had it in his side pocket. That's something, there's no investigative journalism on this, but I can tell you that's a fact. And that is, don't you, it's so obvious that somebody would have called on him if he was actually walking with the knife out. He just passed the Hilton Hotel with tons of people around it, tons of activity. He passed students biking down here where the light is, tons of students. No phone call. Because Jeremy had the knife in the side pocket. So, this video, I do not endorse it. I believe it's faked. I believe there's a number of faked images in it. I believe they deleted frames. They don't have Jeremy scream in this video. They also don't have him standing and thinking about anything, which is what this lady up here says. In this window over here, I interviewed her and everyone along here. She actually saw Jeremy that day outside of her window, right here. That's where she saw him. She told me Jeremy was standing there trying to process information. She used her hands to describe it. So there was a scream that was deleted from this body camera footage, and then there's the image of Jeremy standing trying to process information. But guess what? You won't see that in this video because it's fake. But let's take this fake footage for 31 seconds. So you see Jeremy is obviously walking down the sidewalk peacefully. And Phil Morris wasn't supposed to do a welfare check on Jeremy. It was supposed to be Officer Katie Aaron. So somehow, Officer Phil Morris acted in some way. I'm not sure what kind of protocol he violated, but he acted on his own. He may have heard the radio call when she was talking to the radio station, back to ground, to their dispatch saying, hey, I'm talking to the family here now, I'm going to do a welfare check. Maybe he decided, he heard it and decided to go after Jeremy. He clearly had an intention to go after Jeremy. He had a clear-head intention to do harm because he's brutalized people before. So you can see Jeremy's walking down the street peacefully. Let's go a little bit further. Still walking peacefully. This is 19 seconds. Jeremy's still walking peacefully. Still walking. I don't see any knife in Jeremy's hand. There's no knife in Jeremy's hand. None. There's no knife. Still walking. Oh, okay. At 21, they decide to pixelate Jeremy's face. Okay? I want to point out the pixelation here. Now, as soon as you pixelate anything in a film, it distorts it and the surrounding environment. So that makes it very easy. When there is a distortion in a film and you can't see anything, and by the way, I want to point out, this is an anomaly that I keep seeing every time I pause this film. This is a superficial analysis, but believe me, if I had a forensics lab, they would be able to take this apart. The pixelation is also associated with a black square. Look at that. You see the black square? That shows up when the pixelation does. You see that? You can't see his hands. You can't see his upper body. It's not just his face is pixelated, but you'd only see this if you paused frame by frame. Now remember, I'm not working on a forensic systems right now. I'm just on my computer, pausing, and I'm showing you the distortion in this body camera footage already because there's a black box here. That's an anomaly that should not exist. See that? Should not exist. You should just be able to see a pixelated face, but this is associated with it, and I'm going to tell you my theory. It's because it was altered. That's why that black box is there. That's associated with the altering they did on the body camera footage. So no knife, but a black box. That's at 21. Okay? Still no knife in Jeremy's hand at 22. No knife. Oh, still no knife during that part that I showed you. And now all of a sudden, from Jeremy walking down the street with no knife in his hand, pixelation, and a black box, when I pause it, all of a sudden they cut to an interior picture. Okay? There's that frame of the interior of Morris's car. Here's another frame. Cut away from Jeremy. Another frame. Another frame. I mean, there's more than one frame in what I'm doing because this is not a high-tech forensic computer, with the software. But you can see all this time cutting away. Okay, here we go. So it's very convenient for them in that moment to cut away from Jeremy, who has no obvious knife with a black square and pixelation. Oh, and look here. Look at this up here. What's this about? Jeremy's image is supposedly here. But look here. You see? That's an anomaly that does not fit at all with a linear video of frames. With linear frames in a video, this anomaly does not fit. Is his face up here being pixelated? No. This looks like where Jeremy is right now, and this is at 28 seconds. Still no obvious knife. But guess what happens during that period? Oh, here's some more distortion right here. There's the pixelation, but still this black distortion around it. And here's another piece. All right? So what happens? This is all anomalous. This does not correspond to what linear frames would look like. Here's a circle, and here's some more blacked out area. All right? This is just before Morris raises his gun to Jeremy. So, I believe at this time that cutting to those images, and by those images of being inside the car, it allows them an opportunity to add a knife to Jeremy's hand. Because right after that, like if you go further in the video, which I'm not going to have that here, you'll see Jeremy supposedly with the knife in his hand. All right? But no knife prior to that until they cut to the interior of the car. Those frames could be sequenced any way they want when they alter body camera footage. They can cut out any frame and put it in a sequence. And the sequence of them cutting to those cars and then all of a sudden Jeremy having a knife is highly irregular and suspicious. Where's Jeremy's scream? Where is he standing? You don't see him standing anywhere. Anywhere on there. I'm sorry, I made one mistake. When you go back here to this row of houses, when I pointed to those earlier, I said a woman was looking out her window there. It wasn't there. When we go further along in the video, when you see the video play out to the end, which I can't show you, there's the same row of houses that look exactly the same and there was a lady in the window further on up here in the video at the end that looks just like those apartments who is looking out the window. So that I'm incorrect about, so I want to make that clear and prevent that confusion. There was someone who saw him, but you don't hear any scream on the video yet, and you never do, and you don't see him standing anywhere in the video like she said he was. Just standing, thinking. You don't see it. You don't really even see a knife here in his hand at this point. This is at 29 seconds. But how convenient, he has a knife out. Well, if his knife is out after these shots to the interior of the vehicle, Okay? What does that mean? Well, let me give you a piece of information here. There's two pieces of information here about how police alter body camera footage. One, I spoke to a number of forensic experts in the last 2.5 years across the nation. I have two people lined up, two different forensic labs that I was going to use once I got the exact copies to have an analysis done. One of those persons I spoke to has worked in a number of cases, including FBI cases. He told me that the police, in one case that he had, the police were using body camera footage that showed the person with a knife. Okay, and they said that they were claiming that the person they killed was justified because he had a knife in his hand. But when this forensic expert analyzed the tape with the tools that he has in his lab, he said he was able to prove that that knife that they were claiming was in his hand was a shadow. It was a shadow. And he proved it in his cases. All right? That's why there needs to be a forensic analysis of the video of Jeremy Holmes. Because I don't believe the knife was out. Where's the sheath? Where's the leather sheath? Where is it? I don't see any leather sheath anywhere. It wasn't even part of the evidence. I don't believe that Jeremy's death happened the way they said it did. And I just showed you some very serious anomalies in this body camera footage. Number of the experts I talked to said, when I told them that I couldn't get the unredacted body camera footage copies, that they wouldn't give them to me, almost everyone I talked to, I shouldn't say almost, everyone I talked to, told me that that was a huge red flag, that the police are covering something up. They said there is no reason why the mother shouldn't have the unredacted copies of the body camera footage. There is absolutely no reason. But you won't see that reported in the news because they don't do this kind of journalism. And number two, they've never interviewed me. The Coloradoan doesn't want the truth to come out. They're working with them. The media is working hand in glove to suppress this information that body camera footage can be altered, that body camera footage is not secure, that it's not transparent, and that you cannot get access to police records. They can keep them. They can withhold them from you. They don't want you to know that Colorado is not democratic, that there's not free records, that there's not freedom of speech, that there's not freedom of access to your public records and money you're paying for those records. Now, the other thing I just want to end with here. Please look up Ronaldo Chavez. He's a whistleblower from Albuquerque PD. He worked in the crime lab. He describes all the techniques that the police used and the crime lab used to alter their videos, to fit their reports and their fake narratives, especially in homicides and police homicides. He's out there. He's on the web. The lawsuit, he has a whistleblower lawsuit against Albuquerque PD. His affidavit's out there. It's on my website. The Axon body camera software that comes with the body camera footage allows the police to delete images, to insert images, to create images, to create audio loops. I don't believe Phil Morris told Jeremy to put the gun down, to put a knife down 39 or 37 times. I believe that's an audio loop that was inserted into the body camera footage. And they want you to accept this. The police who kill people with no consequences, the police who killed Jeremy, the judiciary who blocked my access to the copies, the Colorado attorney generals who blocked my access to the copies of this body camera footage want you to believe this police version of the body camera footage. Really? If anyone believes anything put out by police with body camera footage, you're doing a disservice to citizens of Colorado and to American citizens. Body camera footage is not secure. The media doesn't want to report on that. Because, hey, they need the police to enforce their gun confiscation. So if you know that you will never be protected by a police officer, he'll alter his body camera footage, he'll lie about you, he'll lie on your reports, and you have no way to get copies of that, they don't want you to know that. This is faked body camera footage. Susan Holmes.